Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. Today on the podcast, we are talking about the challenges faced by first responders and shift workers. There's been so many fantastic studies done on the challenges of shift work and the effect it has on our health and well-being. The body itself is synchronized to night and day by a small part of the brain known as the circadian clock. And this feeds into everything we do. Body functions, heart rate, blood pressure, temperature, digestion, brain activity fluctuate so much over a 24-hour period. And messing with our circadian clock and engaging in things like shift work is one of the huge challenges that first responders face. And a shift worker, unfortunately, is at an increased risk of health problems such as digestive upsets, obesity, and heart disease, and accidents due to excessive daytime sleepiness. Today I have the incredible privilege of speaking with Grace Cowan, aka the Shift Workers Coach. Grace has a really incredible, insightful, digestible, educational platform through her social media and her coaching platform on the website as well, which you can have a look in the links. And unlike, with the greatest respect, so many other quote influencers out there, she has an enormous amount of authenticity as well, because Grace has spent a career in the police as well. She is now an ex-shift worker, and she fully understands the importance of planning, giving you the right tools, and setting you up for success. It is so incredibly easy to get stuck in a rut and let the days run away with yourselves as the mind slips into this strange fourth realm of sleep, wake, work, food, and you can just become detached from so many parts of your life and so many of those fundamental pillars of health and well-being. And this ultimately results in unhappiness, depression, health challenges, poor sleep, breakdown of relationships. And Grace has kind of experienced a lot of them herself. You're going to hear today how she was able to recognize in herself her life becoming somewhat of a dumpster fire, and she did something about it. She actually grabbed it by the horns, she grabbed the steering wheel, and her transformation has been incredible from all the triathlons she's done, the people that she's helped, and it's a pretty incredible story, to be honest. She started out by working with other police officers as well, because most cops do want to feel strong, capable, and able. They want to know they can handle themselves in any given situation, and firefighters and first responders share this as well. So when you're listening today, think about what you can take away from yourself. Maybe you're worried about the way you look. Maybe you don't feel like you meet the grade in your profession. Maybe you're worried you're not strong enough to deal with a public order or firearms incident. Maybe you're worried you get found out sprinting up the stairs of a high-rise and realize you haven't got what it takes. Grace's pitch is about helping you wake up feeling energized, 1 to 3 stone lighter, clear and focused to get out there, kick ass, take names, and get shit done. Our jobs as first responders is such a self-identifying thing. We are the thing we do is how we feel about it sometimes. And your job takes priority over most things at the time, which often puts you at the bottom of the list. It's time to start serving number 1. I always say you can't pour from an empty cup, and if you don't look after yourself, how the hell are you going to be able to look after anybody else? We need to be at the top of our game all year round in order to serve, protect, and keep safe the communities that rely on us. So there's so much we can take away from today's episode. You might want to take some notes. There are some really good, useful tips. And also Grace takes us into her top 10 desert island exercises at the end of it, which is always one of my favorite things with the guests these days with such expertise and knowledge and experience, such as Grace. So without further ado, if you are sitting comfortably, let's get in there with the one and only Shift Workers Coach, Grace Cowan. I'll see you on the other side. I wanted to start, there's so many places I wanted to start, so I had to really wrestle myself to find one. And I scrolled all the way back to Alicante, 2001. It was you wearing a swimming cozy and some men's shorts. And in your post, you were saying it's because you were ashamed of your chafing legs. Now, I know connecting the dots looking backwards is always easy. And I say that with humor and satire. But like, take me back to where your mindset was then. Because that's probably, and I feel a bit bad actually laughing about it then, because that's probably where a hell of a lot of people are right now.
So take it all the way back to, I guess, growing up and my childhood. I was always the kid that didn't necessarily like sports, wasn't really massively interested. I tried sports and I tried doing sports, but I think because I didn't really have the confidence and I didn't really have the capabilities that other kids had, I didn't like it for that reason. I grew up kind of, I'd say living in my sister's shadow. She was a gymnast, she was someone that was
Bitch.
picked for all the sports teams, and we laugh about it now. Because obviously it's gone completely full circle to me competing in Ironmans and doing what I do now. But at that time, it just didn't necessarily interest me.
It really is a look of the draw at that age, though, isn't it? Because like perseverance doesn't count for as much at that age, because it really is just, did you get the genetics? What are you like right now? It's not like, what have you been doing for the past 5-10 years? Discipline, like an adult's approach. Back then, it's so savage. Not only have you not got the moral resilience and like the self-confidence and your body's changing every 6 months, it's also then like, you're just getting thrown into it and haven't got a chance to practice anything. And are you good at sport? Yes, no. And then that becomes so part of your social dynamic, doesn't it?
That's definitely it. And I think for me, I've never really had great coordination. So when it comes to, I play football now, but it's a work in progress. My hand-to-eye coordination, my foot-to-eye coordination. Even when I went to like gym classes, as I started getting into the gym, everyone's going one way and I'm going the other way. And it's just, I think my coordination has never, I don't think it ever will be. But it's a case of, I think that's why I've kind of gone into the triathlons and the running, and because you're moving in a straight line. That's all you do. You just move in a straight line. You swim in a straight line. You ride a bike in a straight line, and you run in a straight line. Whereas you've not really got to think about, skills, technique. And
I think that's where like triathlons and heptathlons, and also maybe some of the high rock stuff and some CrossFit, maybe some functional fitness. It's not like, say, badminton, bloody, ice hockey, something like that. It is just grunt work done at pace, and then it's like, it's how much heart you've got versus have I got the unique skill set of coordination.
That's it, yeah. So kind of going back to your question about where my mindset was at back then, it's hard to kind of narrow it down into a specific, but I just didn't really have the confidence, I think. It was the confidence that was a big one for me. And I didn't really massively care about looking after myself as much back then. And you just kind of get stuck into that rut. That's the only way I can describe it. The only comfort that I felt was when I was like kind of eating, or it was, doing that was just my thing. I wasn't really necessarily interested in much else. And I think that was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back with how I was feeling at the time. I think that the holiday itself, I booked to go with my sister, and obviously going back to the conversation about my sister, I was like, right, okay, I actually need to do something about this now, because it's affecting me in so many other ways other than just how I look. I was holding myself back from applying for jobs. I was holding myself back from doing things in my life that I potentially could have done because of how I looked and how I felt about myself. So yeah, I guess that was where my mindset was at. I was kind of keeping myself in a box.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together. Did you lean into that as well, though? Like this story we tell ourselves. So you told yourself the story about your sister, you told yourself the story about probably the friends you had, and you're like, no, I'm different from that. I'm the social butterfly, I'm the rebellious one, I'm the party girl, I'm whatever. And people lean into that as well, because that becomes part of their identity. And it's almost it's like a micro self-sabotage. It's like when you see kids smoking. There's no education aspect there. People go, we need to educate children or educate. Usually it's not an educate. Have you heard the analogy of the elephant and the rider?
Yes.
It's a really great book. It's I think it comes from Switch, where it's like the rider, you can give them all the education and the information that you like, But the elephant is the emotion. It's like, it's our self-confidence. It's all the other things that stop us from doing the thing, having that visceral desire to want to do it versus, I know it's the right thing to do. It's logical, but logic doesn't always move us, does it?
Nope, absolutely not. And I think for me, it was just kind of, I just rested on my laurels. And like you say, it's the stories that you tell yourself. I was always the class clown. I was always the funny one. And I think that was what I just liked making people laugh. And I suppose me making people laugh was part of who I was, and taking the mick out of myself and all of these kind of things. That was my identity. Whereas,
and you get rewarded for it as well, don't you? That's the thing. It's like you get social recognition for it, you get popularity, and we're part of the tribe for a different reason. And then we lean into that even more. And that's a great characteristic to have. People would really admire your gregariousness and your ability to present and speak to massive crowds and drop into any conversation. But it also has that counter cost if you don't acknowledge the things that you're leaning away from, which you were back then. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think for me, it kind of changed when, obviously, the holiday, and I feel like you have to get to that point where it's like, enough's enough. And there's no kind of, when people always say, like, what was your tipping point? What was your, the turning point for you? And I think it was just a gradual build-up. For me, it felt like a gradual build-up, and then I got to that point where it was like, I think it was as I was growing up and as I was maturing and as I was going, right, okay, that was fine when I was a teenager. That was fine when I was, being the class clown and making people laugh. But you can't sustain that for the rest of your life and just be like, oh, this is my lot, as people kind of tend to say.
I think the same with addiction. I'm a recovering addict, and people say, "Oh, what was rock bottom?" And I'm like, I think people play into that. Like, did I wake up in a puddle of shit with somebody I didn't know with a needle in my arm? No, I didn't. It was around the time my daughter was born, and it wasn't like I'm holding her, bang, this is the moment. My wife became pregnant, and I thought I'd been lying to so many people all my life. And I got really good at lying, but I also saw the downside of the drugs and what it was doing to my body. And it was just a progressive thing, and there was a step back. It wasn't like, and then I said no, and never again. It was like, no, I fucked it up, and then I started lying again, and then did it again, and then it just progressively got. And that's perhaps a nice analogy for the physical transformation. But also, I know a lot of some of what we're going to talk about today is that people look at the physical. The physical is like the low-hanging fruit. It's like the obvious because it's so there in front of you. But I also feel like that's a bit of a trick, because you and I will probably both know some very, very fit people. I'm sure perhaps you sometimes speak at seminars next to some of them who look a certain way, but their life is a fucking dustbin fire sometimes, and their personal habits and things like that. And I'm not trying to throw salt, as much as that sounds it is, but it's so difficult to get both sides of that, because my pendulum shifted. You just cross addict as an addict, and it became all about different eating habits and training, and that also came with lots of other unintentional costs which hurt my body in different ways and then got injuries. It's very difficult and elusive to hit that moving target of, I want to say balance, but also feel like that's an overused term.
Yeah, definitely. That's such I didn't know that about you either, about the addiction. That's an inspiration. It was
like 11 years ago now, but you're always going through it. But mate, so like, as I've been delving into your past, it's the whole thing about mental health or mental fitness. When people say, "Oh, everyone's fighting a secret battle you know nothing about," whether it's miscarriage, whether it's this, whether it's the struggles with your work. There's so many things that lots of people have been through that you just never think to put as part of the model, because we see people as they are. But what I think you do so wonderfully well is you don't portray yourself as a glistening, shining element of perfection. Like, you are so almost humorlessly bring forth your bits you've got wrong, lessons you've learned, what it cost you, the place you were. Because also, as an 18, 19, 20, up to 23, 24-year-old fitness person, you're just like, get fucked. Do you know what I mean? There's no from and to there. Look, I was born really fit, still really fit. Look how fit I am. And I'm like, mate, who the fuck are you helping?
Exactly that, yeah. And I think it's about being relatable, because I always say I want to be the coach that I wish I'd have had all those years ago, and share those stories and show that there is actually a way out of how you're feeling, and whatever it is that you want to achieve, anything is possible for anyone as long as you actually make that commitment to yourself.
Mm-hmm. I think that's so crucial. Now, I know people will have heard it in the introduction, but I've skipped over it in my head because I've been spending the last week or so looking into you. Well, further than that, but in preparation for our conversation, obviously going a bit deeper down. I'd be remiss, obviously, if we didn't speak about your time in the police, because this is what gives you that level of authenticity versus someone that's been a pro athlete and now just trains other people or something like that. Like, you've come from the first responder community, you know exactly what it's like, you know exactly how difficult it is. Why did you join the police?
For a number of reasons, really. I think most people join the police because they want to kind of save the world, and they've got all these aspirations. And I think for me, I've always loved the bill. This sounds so cliched, but always really interested in like the police programs. And can I just say the completely
London's Burning, Fireman Sam, Ladder 49. We love the shit. Come on.
Opposite to everything that you see day to day whilst you're at work. But yeah, for me, it was that side of things, and it always kind of excited me, like watching those kind of things. And I had that interest and that innate, it was like an itch that I needed to scratch. And aside from that, another reason was where I grew up and how I grew up. I grew up on a council estate, and we were kind of tarred with the same brush as all the other kids. So I had a lot of bad experience with police officers when I was younger. I wasn't necessarily in trouble, but the way that we were treated, I didn't like. So for me, it was like, I want to be the police officer that puts that trust back in, with the public, and actually treat people like a human being. Because I think that's something that, obviously, in the UK, we're police by consent, so it's got to be from the consent of the public. And when I grew up, I didn't have that experience.
I think a lot of people don't know that, that never really gets said. Sorry to interrupt, but that was a great point.
Yeah, and I think for me, it was like, I had so many experiences where I wasn't treated like a human being, I wasn't spoken to like a human being, and regardless, it was just like, you are one of them, kind of, I'm going to disregard everything that you're trying to say to me. So yeah, for me, it was like, it was that side of it as well. I was like, I want to actually make a difference, and treat everybody, the same, regardless of where you're from, regardless of your background, regardless of who you are. I felt like everybody had that chance should have that chance to be treated like a human being. So they were like my two main reasons for joining the job. And I think slowly but surely, as you get into it, it's like you realise that it's an impossible job to do, to kind of save everyone and be that person. But as long as you stick to your own standards and stick to your own, the way that you treat people, then that's all you can do. Because, nobody ever rings the police with good news. Nobody ever rings the police to tell them that they're having a good day. It's like, it's bad news after bad news after bad news after bad news. And I think it's naive for people to think that, that wouldn't affect you in some way, shape or form. But yeah, that's...
No one's pleased to see you half the time. They're always disappointed in stuff that you do. There's another great guy who had him on the podcast recently, and he does funny videos. He does coaching and stuff, I think, as well, for police staff and first responders. But he did a little video sitting in the car when people are banging on the window. And it's like, oh, we're paying you to sit here and have lunch. Why are you not out catching the robbers and shit like that? And it's just like people throwing salt at you constantly. But I want to just add to that important point you made around there is a real socioeconomic eliteness to people, and it reminded of me very recently over Christmas, because we do a lot of fundraising in the fire service, and we go around and we have this Trumpton thing where we have like a Santa Claus sat on the top of the fire engine and collect money, all that sort of stuff. And people that have the least give the most. Like whenever we go to those in the lower socioeconomic levels, in the challenged estates and the challenged communities and stuff like that, where they really have some entrenched, real difficult behavioural challenges, they're always generous with food, drink, mince pies, cups of tea, £5 notes, giving money to charity and stuff like that. And then you go around the locked gates of the so-called elite. Like sometimes, if the fire engine broke down outside and we were sat there for 6 hours waiting for something, they wouldn't come out their house to see if you were okay. Not that they should. Do you know what I mean? All I'm saying is, it's different. They seem to. I don't know why. I don't know why that happens, but yeah, there is like a tarring that they get. But I can only imagine it from the other side as well. So obviously, you've spoken about your childhood. This is a really unique lens that you then got to see it from the other side, because I think it'd be petrifying to be a police officer. People say things about firefighters and like, oh no, I couldn't do what you do. It's like, well, we are trained to do it, and it's not mandatory service. We did volunteer for this. But police officers, I say like, well, I can do what you do. You say, oh, run into a burning building, scary, whatever. Man, the stuff that you guys and girls get faced with, and the almost constant barrage of public attack, like, how did you start to see it from the other side? You said earlier that it wasn't what you thought it would be. And I don't want this to be an advert for people not to join the police, because we need incredible officers out there. Like, try and steel man both sides of the argument for us. What bits of it did you find, God, that was better than I thought it would be, and which bits were like, no, that just wasn't me?
Ooh, I guess on one side it was like, it was what I was expecting it to be, with, like, when, I guess the rewarding side of it, when you deal with someone and afterwards they, you get a good outcome, and that team camaraderie at the end of a job where it's like, right, okay, we've actually done a really good job here, we've managed to do this, we've managed to do that, and that sense of, I suppose, doing your job. Because that is your job. It's to serve and protect people, but also, the damning side of it is the red tape, the regulation. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. And I guess that was a big thing for me. It was like, there's only so much you can do without crossing that red tape and the regulations and the rest of it and things like that. So I guess that was like the downside of it. And then also like looking at the way officers are treated in the force. It's not all bad, and every force is different, and every supervisor is different, and every boss is different, but it does tend to feel a little bit like luck of the draw when it comes to who your team is, who your sergeant is, who your inspector is, and your experience is then moulded into whatever they are and however they treat you, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. In other news, this episode is brought to you in partnership with MSA Safety. Today we have them to thank for the improved firefighter safety through connectivity in their brand new connected firefighter system. At the centre of the connected firefighter platform is the MSA M1 SCBA with telemetry. You can view battery life, air pressure and estimated time remaining either independently on the M1 itself or from the Lunar connected device screen. Also, still with the air status, alarm information, search status, and all of this provided to the incident command for confident decision making during the scene. That integrates straight in with the Lunar system, which is a wireless all-in-one device creating an independent search and rescue network, providing edge detection, enhanced personal thermal imaging, while simplifying post-scene reporting and data retention. One of the key parts of the Lunar is their FAST system, the Firefighting Assisting Search Technology. This combines directional and distance information with thermal imaging to help find separated teammates and decrease response time. It actually connects you to the other crews in the vicinity for a unified search during the time of mutual aid by instantly notifying the network of Lunar devices when there is a downed crew member, allowing for a prompt search and rescue. All of this then plugs into the FireGrid system for cloud-based connectivity, real-time information, and data-driven decisions for the incident commander. It enables you to see the exact location of your firefighters on the scene. And it doesn't require you to be sat on the station. The MSA Hub then provides a wireless gateway straight to the cloud, enabling wireless on-scene data for local and remote incident command for additional eyes on the scene. MSA are truly taking massive strides in the future of improved firefighter safety through connectivity. MSA is dedicated to increasing safety in the fire service through technological advancements. Various feature enhancements, new products, partnerships, and integrations will provide additional capabilities readily accessible by products, software, and services in the brand new MSA Connected Firefighter platform. Now back to the show. Give us, and I appreciate why you would be slightly cryptic out of respect for your colleagues and things like that, but could you give us either a theoretical or a circumstance? Because I don't want to go down the sex conversation, but I often think about female police officers, and I know we're all about equal opportunities, equal rights, and stuff like that, but is policing not a little bit different? Because like you part of your day job is that you might have to physically restrain somebody, and I always think that's a weird circle to try and square in my head when I see female officers, a pair of female officers on the beat. And I know people say, oh well, you just try it. Well, that shouldn't be the point. That shouldn't be the metric of is it okay or not, because there's a genetic aspect to it. And again, we won't go too far down this rabbit hole, but like, what was your experience as a female police officer?
As a female cop, I think
because you are quite short as well.
Yeah, I'm literally like 5 foot nothing. I was always called the pocket rocket, because if I needed to, I could hold my own. But I think there's a big perception of looking at female police officers and going, oh yeah, she won't be able to do X, Y, and Z, and they won't be. And there's also another avenue that some, not all, but some male police officers would feel as though they have to, I'll take care of this. Let me through. I'll deal with this, and which, from their perspective, it might just be a case of, well, I want to keep this female officer safe. I'm looking at this 6 foot burly bloke, and
Is there not an argument for working to your strengths as well, though? Because I think like if you don't have a dog and bark yourself. Do you know what I mean? And I'm saying that about like if we go to a job, if you were on my crew and I'm like, right, we need to gain entry into this house, I'm going to pitch a ladder against the 3rd floor, I would say, Grace, you pop through that top window. Why? Because you wouldn't say why, but like if my logic would be, well, you're most nimble, you're probably going to be the easiest to navigate through there. You're going to go through that window straight onto a kitchen side where I don't want some fat, heavy knuckle dragger like me face planting because he's not remotely agile. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. I don't know if that makes it, it's probably a crap analogy, but like there's an element of working to the team's strengths because you are most likely have a higher emotional intelligence. You will build rapport better with members of the public perhaps than a big 6'5" bold white meathead like me.
Yeah, and I think sometimes as well it's quite good when you get used to working with a certain person or a certain colleague, that good cop, bad cop kind of way of dealing with people, because there's always, everybody has the strengths, and regardless, obviously everyone's trained the same, and the first tool in your toolkit as a police officer should always be your voice, should always be how you communicate with someone. And that was something that I always did. It was, treating people like that human being. And I think, again, going back to the way I was dealt with and the way I was spoken to, that was why that was so important to me. And it's something that you trained on. It's something that you are advised to do. Your communication is your first bit of kit before anything, before absolutely anything that you do. And unfortunately, some people don't have that skill, even though they are in the job, even though they are dealing with the public day in and day out. Naturally, some people don't always have that same skill of being able to converse with people and kind of diffuse situations and build that rapport. So again, going back to the even male-female, it could be 2 females, it could be 2 males, whatever. There's potentially always going to be one person that is more gift of the gab, can talk people round and can actually have that conversation and diffuse situations, whereas some people might have a little bit more going all guns blazing, and that can just explode and the wheels fall off kind of thing. But it's a work in progress. There's no, as much as you taught the rules and regulations, trained, you hone your own craft, and every day is a learning experience. Like one day you'll deal with something, and
I was thinking like communication.
Of course it is, yeah.
So it's an art form. It's your version of it. It's all them soft skills and how you're gonna add your little bit of flavour to the cocktail of what you are as an officer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes you'll say things and it's like, I shouldn't have said that. And then
I imagine in those super tense environments, like you say, it's just I just went, oh shit, I went an inch left in my verbal communication, and damn, they've shot off down this verbal rabbit hole of aggression and frustration. You're like, bollocks, okay, don't do that next time.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually put a reel out the other day, but it's like things that you say without even realising. When you approach somebody or you're dealing with someone, you call them mate, and initially the first thing that comes out of that person's mouth, you're not my mate, and it's like you walk right into these situations. You because you're so on high alert, hypervigilance, like you walk into every situation, and even though you're trained to deal with things in a certain way and think a certain way, that just goes completely out the window. You deal with things based on, like, yes, you have some form of rational decision making, but at the same time, it's like you do what you've got to do.
Yeah, 100%. That aspect of when you're actually in the firing line and actually doing it. I wanted to ask you about, because we've gone through some of the practical aspects of the job there, but what was this like trying to manage it as a cognitive load? Because I remember seeing one of your 2018 posts where you were saying like finishing a shift and straight on the booze and chockies, because we also expect our officers to be, we almost have the audacity to say, I want you to be the bastion of communal justice. And then I also want you to be a supreme athlete, and I want you to have a rock solid steel like moral compass. Do you know what I mean? Some things got to give, and I feel like we set officers and a lot of shift workers up to fail and then be surprised when their mental or physical health. Like which one, looking back, do you think was the first one that you felt slipping down the mountain? I imagine they kind of both run in conjunction, don't they? But like, how are you handling the cognitive load alongside sleep, stress, work, relationship, everything?
Not very well, to put it bluntly. I'd obviously done years of shift work. I worked in children's homes and I worked in NHS 136 suites, but then the police was just completely different to that. And the stress that you deal with, the trauma, and things that you kind of see on a day-to-day, nothing, no amount of training prepares you for what you deal with. And I think for me, it was just kind of like, it was a release to come home. Drinking just made you feel a little bit better. It relaxes your mind. It was one of those things where, because I didn't have a set routine with what time I was getting up, my sleep pattern was all over, my eating, I literally just used to live off energy drinks, fizzy sweets, night nurse. My order at McDonald's when I used to get a coffee, this is disgraceful, right? So I used to go to McDonald's drive-thru on night shifts. I'd get a flat white with toffee syrup in it and a double espresso, and I'd get that about 3 times a night. I was absolutely off my rocker. Yeah.
And now the education that you have now, and alongside your partner as well, that incredible spike and crash of insulin and sugar and caffeine and adenosine fuckery. Oh my God. Like, the cognitive yo-yo there is just so difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, and then I was going home, I was having night nurse to get to sleep, then waking up groggy, and it was just this continuum. So for me, I'd say it was definitely, I couldn't even pinpoint. I'd say the mindset affected the physical, but then they both just kind of blurred into one sort of mess of, I just wasn't
sleeping well. It's like they grab hold of each other and they're both rolling downhill, and each one's telling the other one to stop, but they're still angry and both rolling, picking up speed, and it's like, fuck. That's why I think it's so hard though, because you can't like drive a stake in the ground to help yourself stop. I mean, like when you're working with people now, how do you slow that? I mean, how did you slow that for yourself? That tumbling chaos of sort of, spiral of doom of physical and mental deterioration. How did you start to stick your heels into the side of the mountain to slow that slide down, if you will? And what have you found that's working or helps people get perspective and perhaps slow the slide for themselves?
For me, it got to a point where I felt like my life was an existence, and I wasn't going places. I'd actually go and sit with my friends sometimes, and I couldn't even be bothered speaking. I couldn't even be bothered, like, I'd cancel plans all the time. I couldn't even be bothered ringing people. That's how tanked I felt. I just felt like a shell of my former self. When I look back at pictures now of that time, I looked horrendous, but you don't necessarily notice when you're looking at yourself day by day. You don't necessarily notice the impact that all of these habits are having on you. And I think for me, it was like, right, okay, I need to become a little bit more educated around what is going on with my body and what does it entail to become a shift worker, and how do you manipulate your lifestyle a little bit different? Because there was nothing out there. There was absolutely, unless you look into the research around shift work and how it affects your body and how to actually manipulate your sleep, your nutrition, and all of these kind of things, you don't know. You literally don't know.
The irony of that stuff is, like, you can't see the picture when you're in the frame. You're so busy with your day to day. It's like, oh, take a week off and just read all these studies and then sort your shit out. And it's like, well, that's never going to happen.
No, and I think that's why, I mean, if you'll see a lot of the posts that I do, I never really use technical terms. I never really use the scientific versions of anything, because people are busy. People are, stressed and overwhelmed enough. If I start throwing all these terminology, scientific reasons and things like that, I break it down into layman's terms for people. So it's like, I've digested this information. Here it is for you in a simple and easy to digest way of how you can actually, start to implement some of these better habits.
That digestible bit there, that's what it's about. Because also the language that a lot of this stuff is written in, having read a number of academic papers, and I was at Loughborough University for a period of time, so we used to read a lot of these. They're not written in English. The language is actually quite almost condescending, but also quite distancing from the person. It's not digestible. It's almost like you can't grab hold of it. There's no handles of normal language for you to be able to interpret it. There's like the odd paragraph where you can stay with it, and then it goes off down another rabbit hole, and you almost have to come out of the study to go onto Google to realise what the fucking hell they're going on about, to go back into the study and rejoin the conversation, and it can be so difficult. And I think that's what you do so very well. And I know, we acknowledged your partner before we came on today. You've also got a secret superpower of like a team of Avengers, of very knowledgeable people as well, including your partner, who help reinterpret these things in digestible, usable ways, which I think is a very, very, very difficult skill. I always think of, I actually thought of this when I was looking at some of your stuff the other day. Do you remember, remember, he's not dead. Do you remember Professor Brian Cox? Oh, he's probably still around. He's still doing us. The guy, he looks a bit weird. He's a white guy, and he does a lot of science shows. And there's a black astrology professor from America who was also great at this. And basically, if you know something well enough, you should be able to explain it to a 5-year-old. Use 5-year-olds' language, because if you know your subject matter well enough, and Professor Brian Cox, he does all this stuff on astrology and the human body and like how atoms work and all this sort of stuff, but he says it in such a language where you're like, oh, I get it. And then physics becomes accessible to the rest of us. Do you know what I mean? And I think that it reminded me when I saw you unpicking some of the stuff in your posts and explaining it. I saw where some of that probably came from, and I was like, she's done a really great job there of breaking that down in a usable manner that someone can pick up and actually deploy. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think, like, going back to the digestible part of it, it's got to be bite-sized chunks, because everyone's busy, everyone's stressed, life takes over a lot of the time. So most shift workers cannot see the wood for the trees. And for me, it's like, right, how can we make things, and you probably see me talk about it all the time, about the 1% principle. And it's something that I work with my clients. It's like, let's just build on some better habits, but focus on 1% better each and every single day. Because if you try to, a lot of the time what I hear shift workers say, and people in general, it's like, I'm just going to go for a run, I'm just going to go to the gym, I'm just going to do all of these things in terms of fitness, which is great that people want to move the body. But if you've not first worked on those foundations of how are you sleeping, what does your nutrition look like, how, you know, are you drinking enough water, these things that you think, well, yeah, that's pretty simple, like it's, you know, but simple isn't always effective when it comes to shift work.
And common sense is never
like
commonplace.
Oh, absolutely not. No. And I was an actual first class victim of that very thing. You know, I knew all of these things, but I wasn't doing it. And I think sometimes you do just need that reminder of, right, okay, let's work on foundations before anything else, because you simply can't build a house unless you do.
I always think that some people are looking for, and this probably a whole sector, or not a whole sector, but certainly a lot of the supplement sectors built on this. I'm looking for what's the secret, Grace? Tell me the secret. You know, I want the secret. And the secret is fucking boring. The secret is all of the fundamentals, you know, and people say, yeah, but I did see that when Grace was doing a triathlon, or when Grace was doing this, or when fucking Usain Bolt was doing whatever, he was taking an extra 4 grams of branched chain amino acids on a Friday afternoon at 2:47 p.m. Is that what I need to be doing? And you're talking about step number 94. Do you know what I mean? You're not doing steps 1 to 5. No. I know. I need to drink more, and I need to get my sleep regular habit and all that sort of shit, and calorie deficit and whatever. But talk to me about step 76, and you're like, you've got to do the fundamentals. You've got to do the boring stuff for long enough, because a lot of people have, I always say, they have uphill hopes and downhill habits. You know, they have uphill aspirations, and they have all of these glorious things that they're going to do. They speak with you, no doubt, or one of you member of your team, and they have like a warm bath analogy. They have a coaching session, really excited about it, really fantastic, really high aspirations, and you'll have done a wonderful job of making them feel great. But if they're still looking for step 96 and they don't take on board what you've said, you look for the 1%, look for the marginal gains, get the fundamentals right first, and they re-engage with downhill habits, then it's almost like you're just perpetuating that lie to yourself that this is going to get better. How's it going to get better? You're not doing the fundamentals.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's literally the first thing that we work on within the program, and that's how I transitioned out of how I was feeling. So and my clients will come to me in a couple of weeks' time, and they'll be like, God, I feel like you've waved this magic wand. I just feel so much better. And it's like, no, this is called consistency compounding. Like, I always use the 2p analogy. And it's like when you go to the arcades and you put a 2p in the slot machine, it drops down, nothing happens. You put another one in, it drops down, nothing happens. And then eventually you'll put the third, the fourth, the fifth, and then you get that payout. That's exactly the same way as it works when it comes to building those habits and building anything in terms of like changing anything that you're doing in your day-to-day life. On that day, by doing something that is going to kind of send those 1% in an upward direction, i.e., you know, sleeping better, eating better, whatever, you're not going to initially go, oh my God, I feel amazing. It's going to be a couple of weeks down the line where it's like, yes, right, okay, I'm starting to feel better now. So I always say, like, you know, 1% in the right direction is a 2p in the slot machine.
Though, yeah, and that's the effect of the analogy of compound interest, isn't it? I remember Tony Robbins. Did you ever do any Tony Robbins stuff?
Yes.
Oh my fucking God!
I used to love him.
The power within. I had the 10 discs. You know, you had the 10 CDs.
Yeah.
You had to change them out, and I used to put them in my Walkman because this was before MP3s and all that sort of stuff. Did you ever go to the Power Unleash the Power Within? Did you do one of them?
Yeah, I did one of the live ones, and where he makes you like stand up and scream, and
stand up and scream, walk over the coals at the end of it, and you know what? People are like, okay, rah BS, and the American stuff. I think, again, that's what you do so well, because a lot of the American stuff is so difficult for people to get involved with because it is very high-fi rah-rah. Do you know what I mean? And it is a little bit about affirmation. The thought process behind it and a lot of the context does work, but we're very pessimistic as a UK society, and we're self-deprecating and all this sort of stuff. Like, in fact, that's a good thing I did want to ask you is, seeing what you did and going out and doing the role of a police officer day in and day out, how did you not become a tremendous pessimist and just like looking, how did you keep seeing the good in the world without getting too ethereal and woo-woo? Like, how did you keep staying optimistic about life and the world when you were seeing all that? Because you do see the very worst of the society a lot of the time, really. Today's podcast is powered by our partner Lifelines and their revolutionary approach to functional hydration. Just like in firefighting, water is essential for body function, but studies show more than 80% of firefighters are dehydrated. A 25-year study findings from the National Institute of Health showed poor hydration to be linked to early aging and chronic disease, and even mild dehydration results in significant negative impact outcomes, including headaches, exhaustion, rapid pulse, irritability, and poor cognitive function. A study conducted by Yale University showed that participants who were just 1% dehydrated had a 12% increase in errors when performing tasks that required cognitive flexibility. In addition, dehydration is shown to worsen mood and attitude, contribute to confusion and poor decision making, and negatively affect memory and judgment. In other words, you really don't want your incident commander, firefighter, or for that matter any first responder on a critical scene to be even slightly dehydrated. Mild dehydration occurs when a person is just 1.5% dehydrated, a condition that does not even trigger the thirst response in most people. So just imagine how quickly a firefighter or any first responder can and does become dehydrated in their day-to-day duties, which is why I address my hydration first thing every day with Lifelines. Go into the notes for this episode and specifically check out Lifeline's Hydro Fuel and Hydro OG by clicking in the notes for the podcast for a clean energy solution designed for those who demand more from their day. Now back to the show.
Yeah, I think when I joined the job was when I kind of focused a little bit more on reading podcasts, and prior to that I hadn't really dipped into much of anything like that. Again, I was I suppose categorically a little bit like you've just said there, a little bit like pessimistic and rah-de-rah and not really that interested in it, but that was when I did start to look at, I suppose, going from a fixed mindset to that growth mindset of, right, okay, my head isn't where it needs to be and I know that I'm struggling. How can I make this better? I can either sit and ruminate in these thoughts and go down all these rabbit holes of self-destruction, or I can grab the reins and make my life better, which is obviously what I started to do. And one of the podcasts that I loved, and I used to wait for it to come out each and every single, it was like I'm sure it's like a Monday and a Friday, but Jay Shetty, I really got into Jay Shetty at the time.
Oh, yes.
I absolutely loved him. I don't listen to him as much anymore, but he got me through some really tough times.
I think he got a little bit weird after he did some stuff with, he did a year, I think, with Will Smith, and then after that, a little bit weird. But he had some fantastic stuff. I think I first discovered him with, it was Monk. What was his first book called?
Think Like a Monk.
Think Like a Monk.
Like a Monk, yeah.
Because I stumbled across that accidentally after I had first seen the Monk That Bought a Ferrari by another writer. And that was another fantastic book. And then I came on to Jay Shetty. Yeah, and he did some of his original videos and some of his original books were absolutely fantastic. He's got such a beautiful voice. Actually, he's a pretty handsome fella as well.
Yeah, I think that was
got the cat's eyes on him as well. He's an easy one to look at. But yeah, Jay Shetty, what an incredible place to start. And then I think I went Tony Robbins, Tim Ferriss. And then I also went way back to all the Jim Rohn, and all the old speakers. And again, some of that is too much American rah-rah. But did you do this in secret? Because you obviously saw that what you were doing wasn't working. Your current blueprint, your current approach to life was like, where is this going, Grace? Realistically, how is this actually going to get any better? So you were, I don't want to say you were desperate, but you were looking for solutions. But again, you used to not frown, but you weren't bought into this stuff before then. And how old would you have been around this time, just for people's context?
Probably around like mid-20s. Yeah, I'd say around mid-20s. And that was when, and there was another podcast that I loved, and it was called Wake Up, Wind Down by Niall Breslin, and he stopped doing them in 2020. No. And it was basically a 3-minute video in the morning, a 3-minute recording in the morning, and a 3-minute recording at night. And it was just to kind of frame how are you going to start your day, how are you going to end your day. And I think that was the biggest thing that I've learned is so important in terms of, you know, your focus, your clarity, what are you actually doing day to day, and is that moving you further towards your goals or further away from your goals? And that was, I was gutted when that one stopped. But now
I actually think that approach to podcasting is really good as well, and I think people should do more of that, because you know Ryan Holiday, Daily Stoic.
Yes.
He does a great version of that. You know, he only puts out like 2 or 3 minutes in the morning every day or so, and he also has the Daily Stoic book where it's like 366, I think they have readings in there, and you just read a paragraph in the morning. Really, and again, that echoes straight back to what you were saying about that 1%. It's like, well, actually, I haven't got to listen to the 7-hour audiobook this morning before I fucking get to work. I haven't got to, do a 3-hour priming routine, including an ice bath and, breathing through 27 different nostrils. Those digestible 1% and making it sustainable. I suppose that's a big thing you work with your clients as well, is not throwing the baby out with the bathwater and setting up a new blueprint, a new habit for life that is going to be sustainable. Otherwise, it's too much of a cognitive shift to try and jerk everything to the left and throw everything out at once, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think everyone's different as well. It's like when we're talking about podcasts and setting yourself up for the day and kind of ending your day in a certain way, there's not always going to be, days where you wake up and feel, oh my God, this by doing what I'm doing and listening to this podcast, it's immediately going to make me feel better. But as long as you're doing something, you're still actively sending those 1% in that upward direction. You're on the green line rather than going, right, okay, I'm just going to sit and I'm going to scroll my phone for the first hour. I'm not going to drink any water. I'm going to neck a coffee straight away. And those little 1%, I cannot stress how much like they saved me, and it's now become my identity. It's now become part of who I am every single day. I wake up and I journal. I have my Barocca. It's like clockwork. Everything that I do in the morning and everything I do at night is clockwork. It's regimented. It's how I like it.
People will hear that and they'll go, "Oh, fucking hell, Grace, it's a bit boring." But everyone does it. Even if you don't think of yourself as a quote-unquote disciplined person, you are a creature of habit. So you already have your habits. You already do the same stuff every morning anyway, whether or not you consider that a daily discipline, a priming routine, or just getting up. You already do a thing like that. So all we're talking about is swapping one for another. Okay, change that. It's not about I've got to start doing everything differently. You're already doing a habit. It's the same when we think of diet, isn't it? Most people are eating the same 8 or 9 meals every week. That's about it. That's what makes up your life for most people. We just talk about swapping them. People are, oh, what, I have to eat a fixed thing all the time. We don't have to at all. No, there's always variety. But you're already eating a fixed routine anyway. And it's difficult. I suppose it's whether or not people feel like it's out of choice or whether it's imposed upon them. And you made the choice, like yours were choices, whilst they may have been self-imposed through you felt things in your life weren't going in the direction you wanted them to go in. There was an element of choice. But I also think that when people have that choice taken away from them, like you sit down in the NHS and they go, "Oh, Grace, you're 23 stone. Your blood pressure's through the roof. You're going to die in a year if you don't change all of these habits." That becomes a must. Because most people live in the should world, don't they? And again, this is a Tony Robbins thing. He always says we should all over ourselves. How did you turn, let's get into some of that language. How did you turn some of those shoulds into a must? What did it take for you to start doing the things you are now? And your life just seems to have been on an accelerated success story since you, in fact, we'll talk in a minute about when you left in 2021 as well. But how did you turn these things from a should into a must?
Again, I don't think there's ever really a definite answer as to when that happened. I'm, again, going back to the 1% and the consistency. It's just a case of working on, right, okay, what you've got to be a kind of like an inspector into your own life. And there's always going to be one or two areas in your life that you know you need to improve right now. For me, at that moment in time, it was the caffeine and the sleep, because I was tired and I was wired constantly, and my central nervous system was absolutely on the floor. I was in this high state of stress constantly, and then knocking myself out, and I knew that was having an effect on me mentally, physically, emotionally. I was aggy for no reason, and I was kind of like I was just watching everything crumble around me. That's the best way that I can describe it. Relationships, friendships, the way I was potentially performing at work and wasn't going to the gym, and I guess that was where it's like, right, okay, what is it that I need to do, like in this instance, and how can I actually make this better? I got myself an eye mask, I got myself some earplugs, I bought myself some blue light blocking glasses, I stopped drinking in as much caffeine, went cold turkey off the night nurse, all of these things. And initially, it was like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to sleep, like, oh my, because I was just so used to having the night nurse, putting my head on the pillow, putting another pillow over my head, and just like completely conking myself out. And initially, you lie there thinking, I'm not going to sleep. And then guess what? You fall asleep. And then you wake up the next day and it's like, oh my God, I feel so much more fresh. And then that is your motivation. You're feeling the results. You're actually thinking, right, okay, if I do that, I'm going to feel better. If I do that, I'm going to feel worse. And I guess that was where it kind of built things for me. But that's why, I always say to people, sleep, fix your sleep before anything.
That can be so difficult for shift workers. So like you've given us some tactics and an approach to it there. What advice do you give with people now, especially when they're working day and night? Like, is it the blocking blinds? Because sleep is a secret superpower. We idolize people that didn't sleep in the 70s and the 80s, and the Margaret Thatchers of the world, and the 4 hours sleep, and sleep when I'm dead, and sleep is the cousin of death, and all these silly things that we came up with and post on Instagram. It is a secret superpower, and I think I'm in that middle ground now. I'm not young or old, but I'm starting to value, or have in the last 2 or 3 years, really, really found the difference when I sleep well and when I don't. I always recommend sticking to the same wind down routine regardless, because 9 out of 10, it's not necessarily a sleep problem. It's everything that you're doing around that. And for the body to obviously get into that restful state, the best way I can describe it, and this is what I talk to my clients about all the time, you spend all of your time at work in a state of high stress. You then coming home, carrying that stress, and then trying to get in bed when you're still feeling stressed. So if you have a wind down routine that kind of tells your mind, right, okay, this smell, this lavender smell that we're putting on our pillows, it kind of tells the brain that it's time to relax. So keeping the same things, whether you're on an early shift, whether you're on a late shift, whether you're on a night shift, if you do all of those same things, it triggers to the mind and the body, right, okay, this is what we do when we're relaxing. So it will naturally reduce your stress hormones and increase your sleepiness hormones, because the body likes repetition. And if you continue to build on that,
then you're going to be getting yourself into a relaxed state, and you're going to actually sleep better regardless of what time of day it is. Because I think that's where a lot of people fall short. It's like, oh, well, you know, I do this on that shift and I'll do that on that shift. And I was the same, and it's so easy to fall into that. But honestly, if you try, you know, do or do not, there is no try. So I don't know why I just said try. Keep that routine the absolute same, regardless. And, you know, it's never going to be easy. And I say this all the time, it's never going to be an easy fix. But it's, you know, if the pain of staying the same outweighs the pain of change, I think that's where, you know, you've got to do something about it.
100%. Because we'll always, it's a Tony thing, isn't it? We'll always move more away from pain than we will towards pleasure. It's the fact that you've got to find that thing that's most painful to you and use it as that motivation to fuel you, because it's only when we eventually look at ourselves and appreciate where we really are that we'll actually move forward. Otherwise we just keep tricking ourselves. You obviously do so much now with your whole team in the way that you guys help people, I think, all across the road now, to be fair. I imagine you have clients absolutely everywhere. When did you first start doing coaching? What was your exploration into it? Because it will be hard for people, again, like we said earlier, to look at you now, thousands and thousands of clients and a growing team, and you're living out in Dubai now. Your life is almost unrecognizable from what it was before, and also your self-belief and your confidence and the way that you inspire people. When did you first start realizing that what you were doing was working, what you were doing was not readily available to other people, hence why you'd kind of had to create it for yourself, and then have the belief to step out there and start helping other people with it? I
actually started coaching a couple of my friends at work, people that was always intrigued, like, oh, what's that you're eating, and you know, what I was doing at the gym, and people started to take interest in obviously what I was doing. I was doing my qualification whilst I was in the job, and then I just started coaching people for free, and it literally spiraled from there, I think, because the rewarding aspect that comes as part of coaching and being able to help someone else better their life from a place of experience and knowing how they're feeling and how you can help them out of it, was just, I didn't realise how much it was like my calling until I started doing it, because obviously it was like, oh, I'll just do this alongside the job, and I guess I never in a million years expected it to get to where it is and what it is. It just kind of took off in crazy directions, yeah.
But isn't it also, like, with the greatest of respect, it's almost sad, the fact that there was obviously such a massive need for this, because you'd almost, I mean, you wouldn't have hoped, but you almost hoped that there wouldn't have been a need for this because it was already so readily available. I think the fact that what you do is so relevant, so useful, so helpful to people is a reflection of how much people are struggling out there. They're clearly struggling, looking for these answers. And that must be a strange duality to, like, mentally live in, to know what you're doing is helping so many people, but to also think about all the people that haven't found the answer yet, haven't found a solution, haven't found a sustainable path to a fitter, healthier, stronger, happier, ultimately, version of what they're currently doing with their life.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing for me was getting things out on social media and putting as much helpful advice, as much value on my page as I possibly could. Because, like you say, it should be readily available. It shouldn't be something that people... And again, it's making it that digestible. Can I explain this to a 5-year-old? You know, I've got 30 seconds to get a point across on a video. How can I break it down and make it as simple and effective as it possibly can be? Even if one of my videos helps one person, happy days. because that's the goal.
I think it's incredible what you do. Now, I wanted to. I'm really conscious of time because there's so much. I feel like I've waffled my way through some stuff, but I was so excited to get on a chance and speak with you because I think some stuff you're doing is incredible, and it's kind of like I think I first learned of you through meeting some officers out in the area that I work with, and it was just after the summer last year where people hadn't quite maybe been away and done the things I wanted to do, and the people that had, I think a friend of mine had worked with yourself or a member of your team. But anyway, you're now living out in Dubai with your partner, which is just an incredible transformation. And I recently saw the stuff that you're sharing around this SWC 56. There is one bonus question I want to ask you just before the end. This is always a 10 exercise thing I like to push people into a corner with because I feel like it's an impossible thing to ask. But before we go there, what's SWC 56?
So SWC 56 is something that we're bringing in. We're actually running a challenge at the moment. The first intake of SWC 56, but rather than it was initially going to be a seasonal thing where it's like we'll run challenges throughout the year, and the 56 basically stems from 56 days, so it's an 8-week challenge designed on the before and after physical transformation, because what we found was there's two types of people that want to come into the coaching. There tends to be the ones that are complete beginners that require a little bit more in-depth support. They need that intense, right, okay, let's break things down and let's, literally start from the bottom and build the scaffolding day by day. They need that intensity. Whereas there's also other people that they know the way around the gym, they know about tracking food, they've got a little bit of knowledge around nutrition, and they just need a bit of structure and a bit of education around the shift work. So what we've now done is we've kind of split it into two sections of, right, okay, Tier 1 and Tier 2. If you come in at Tier 1, it's the SWC 56, which, again, isn't as in-depth one-to-one support, but it's still going to give you the education, the structure, the accountability.
I think that's a bigger audience. I think that's massive.
Yes.
I think that's huge.
Yeah.
People that get they've done the awareness piece, if you know what I mean, and they just need the structure and the accountability. They're like, don't need to hold my hand. It's okay. I'm not going to use up too much of your time. I want to be part of something, and I want to feel the win as a team. I think you're 100% right there. I think that's like 75% of the bucket.
Yeah. So that's SWC 56. Like I said, it's running at the minute, but the first way we did it was like a challenge, and it was going to be 8 weeks, and we'll run it a few times a year, whereas now it's just going to be evergreen that runs consistently throughout the year. So yeah, I'm excited to release it in the next few weeks, so you'll have to keep your eyes peeled.
It's such a great thing to have people to be able to act, and it also makes it, people love the fact when people think it's like SMART goals, 8 weeks, they can commit to that. Sometimes the idea of eternity, but the irony is, once they get 2 or 3 weeks in with this sort of thing, they'll be like, I'm going to do this forever. Do you know what I mean? Because they'll see that it's working. But it's that, right, 8 weeks, I can commit to 8 weeks, it's not forever. What is that? It's 2 months. If I'm really struggling, I'm sure they'll be there to support me. But I know these systems work, and I've seen some of the behind the scenes stuff on it. It looks incredible. I want to be respectful of your time, but before we go, I wanted to try and force you into the impossible question, which is a fun thing I've done with a few people around. If you only, because you've done so much, you're like the hybrid athlete, as much as that's becoming an overused term, but you're fit, you're strong, but you can also do the triathlons. You clearly can handle yourself as an officer. If you only had 10 exercises that you're allowed to do, that kind of desert island disc analogy, and they had to keep you happy, healthy, but also fit, strong, what would they be if we forced you into 10? You can imagine you've got the Gucciest, nicest gym ever, anything's available, any variation. What would be on your list?
Yeah.
We'll write them down and we'll keep a count.
First up, I'd say squats, but I'm going to give you 2 variations of that. So front and back squat.
Barbell?
Yes, barbell.
Okay.
I love a barbell squat. Like, squats are my favourite. Barbell deadlift, dumbbell chest press, I struggle with the barbell when it comes to chest because I've got
flat or incline.
A bit of a niggle in my rotator.
If I had to force you into
incline.
One. Okay, always.
Incline, yeah. Incline, and I think incline works better with females as well because of the position and where you want to actually build as a female.
I think flat bench and flat dumbbells causes loads of rotator. Like I did powerlifting for a number of years. Flat bench biomechanically is a fucking terrible movement, you know. It's really bad for you. Your rotator cuffs, you show your scapula. It doesn't fucking work properly.
You're fixing yourself, in that position. I always, because with the dumbbells you can manipulate them.
Yes. And they fire all the stabilizers, and everything is just so much. So we've got 3 there. We've got squats, rear and front, deadlifts, and we've got dumbbell incline.
Pull-ups.
Okay. Wide grip, narrow grip. If you had to have a preference. Overhand, underhand.
Neutral.
Okay.
Neutral grip. I'm still struggling with the overhand. So, pull-ups. Then, I love biceps, triceps. My favourite bicep is seated 45-degree angle. If we want to get specific,
it's so nice, isn't it? Because you get that pinch right at the back of it, and you can't really swing it. You can't really throw it. It's such a hyperextension on the elbow. I love that. And you don't need to lose a lot of weight for it either. You're literally using barely anything, and you get an amazing pull from it. Okay,
yep.
So we call that incline biceps. Yep.
With the triceps, again, I like working in that lengthened range, so like the overhead cable with triceps.
Okay. I'm surprised you went for an isolated bicep, given that you've got the pull-up in there already, because you're at 6 now. You've only got 4 left.
I do love a bicep curl, though.
No, 100% 8.
Like at the end of every single workout, I always do some form of
the guns. Like a rich piano move. I love
biceps, triceps, lat raises as well.
Okay.
Again, most people hate them, but I actually love them.
Side lat raises or front?
Side.
Side for the side delts, yep, and the traps as well.
Yes. What are we on now?
This is number 8 coming up. So you've not got anything specific shoulder. We've obviously got a side delt in there. We've got the skin. We've got the glutes and the quads covered. We've got the lower back. We've got some of the upper back with the pull-ups. We've got the chest pretty much covered. Arms are smashed, and we just went side delt.
Arms are smashed. Dumbbell shoulder press.
Okay. Standing, seating.
Again, seated neutral grip.
Okay. Dumbbell,
RDLs, barbell
neutral.
RDLs.
Okay. You putting RDLs in as well?
Yeah.
Okay. You've got 1 left.
I love an RDL.
You haven't got any cardio yet, which is not the be all and end all, because I tend to train at a tempo now where I'm either doing like EMOM style stuff, or I'm training at a tempo where you don't specifically need any mobility or cardio. And again, you can do your yoga routine alongside this, or you can do all your stretching and mobility. But I did just want to nudge it. And we've got pull-ups. Pull-ups is the only body weight we've got, which is also okay. But I'm just playing devil's advocate on every avenue because you've got 1 left. You've got nothing specific to the core yet. Whilst, to be fair, squats, deadlifts, blah, 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 everything is getting a bit of core. And I actually almost never do, unless it's a toe to bar movement that I throw in somewhere. I don't really do any specific ab-only thing now.
Whenever anyone asks me what the best exercise is for the core, I'll say a bicep curl. Because realistically, if you think every single movement, you've got to brace your core.
Yeah.
Because if you don't brace your core, you're not getting the strength, you're not getting the correct form, the correct technique. Like every single movement that you do, down to a bicep curl, requires you to activate that core.
Especially if you're getting involved with 3 weights and stuff like that, because that's where the machine stuff isn't ideal for people, because it doesn't encourage you to engage the core. And people that are least fit sometimes start with machines, and I'm like, even if it's super light, just use a slam ball or a dumbbell, because you'll get the core. But anyway, sorry, last one, cap us off. What have we got?
Can I put a swim in there?
Of course you can. And I'd love you to explain why, because I love swimming,
Has it got a
and
pool
it's difficult. Yeah, it's got a pool, it's got we'll sauna and ice bath and all
Right.
that shit around it as well. But
Oh,
swimming's,
brilliant.
I always use swimming for active recovery because when I want to train that day but I've done too much. Talk to me about why you found swimming to be so good and why you're making that in there.
Swimming was the only thing that I was ever good at, even when I was younger. So when we were talking about PE and sports and team sports or anything like that, that was the only thing that I ever got top marks for at school. And that was where I started my fitness journey, in the pool.
Nice.
That was where the first ever bit of weight that I lost, the first 2 stone that I lost, came from swimming. So swimming's always kind of been my thing.
I think it's a great place
again,
for people to
it's-
start. Because if you're embarrassed with your body, I know you think, oh, well, I'm getting to a cosy, but actually you're in the water, people can't see you. If you struggle, like, oh, just do a 5-mile run. Well, you know, swimming's really easy on the joints. It's great for mobility. It's like full body. I think it's amazing. It frustrates me how difficult it is for me to put it in sometimes because it becomes a big thing. Like I have to drive there, park, get changed, get in, do the thing, get out, shower, but that, and it becomes a bigger
Wash your
thing.
hair.
So I wash my hair. It's terrible. Put my makeup back on. You know, so I only do it once a week. But if you can set it up well, like if you've got a good facility that you go to, and I can only imagine how incredible some of the facilities are out there, it is a real longevity piece to put swimming back in. My shoulder mobility has gotten so much better. I used to be like 24 stone full of steroids and I couldn't fucking swim anymore. It was crazy. I didn't realize I couldn't swim anymore. I couldn't do bloody, front crawl. And I missed it. I really missed it.
Yeah.
Right. I know we're on a time cap today, but Grace, thank you so much for your time today. I've absolutely loved it. There's so much stuff we didn't get onto, but we had the impossible task today of trying to encapsulate all the work you've done, the police work. We didn't even get onto some of the incredible stuff that you and your partner are doing together out in Dubai now, which is a whole nother chapter. I'd probably love to have you on. I think maybe I'd love to have you back on in like October, November, maybe as people are heading into that Christmas period. If you'd be up for it, I'd love to have you back on because I think you are one of those rare authentics that has actually been and done the thing. And especially when it comes to first responders and shift workers trying to get healthier, you come from a very different angle because you've walked the walk and talked the talk. You've actually been there and done it. So I really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
No, thank you. And I'd absolutely love to come back on. We can do a part 2.
Send my love to everybody. I'll speak to you soon.
Speak to you soon.
The Firefighters Podcast was created to recognize, acknowledge, inspire, and hopefully even motivate these incredible individuals who have chosen to be part of the first responder community. Our driving purpose is to create a legacy resource for the current and future generations of firefighters and first responders. We get some incredible feedback from listeners and guests. And as the podcast grows, our desire to create longevity and sustainability means we are asking for the support of our listeners. If you want to support the podcast, if you want to get discounts to our merchandise, hoodies, clothing, coins, patches, tallies, and also access to all of the incredible documents get shared with us from our podcast guests and sector leaders, then please head over to our Patreon page, and for just £3 a month, you can support the future of the podcast. Please finally hit that follow, subscribe, or rate button on the platform you're listening, and wherever you're in the world, please support your emergency services responders, and thank you for listening.